CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to The World Today, live from CGTN in London. I'm Jamie Owen. Our top stories. The world's richest countries agree how to tax big companies like Amazon and Google. Russia's president criticizes the United States for double standards on the Washington rioters ahead of a summit with Joe Biden. And the latest stopover in an incredible journey, the 15 Asian elephants trekking across China. After years of talking about it, finance ministers from the world's richest countries, the G7 group of leading economies, have agreed to an historic shake-up of the global tax system. The deal is bad news for tax havens around the world and for companies accused of not paying their fair share of corporate tax. Well, CGTN's correspondent Naweed Jabarkil has been following the meeting here in London. This is something that's been discussed for years and years. What's changed? Why now?
Yeah, Rishi Sunak, the UK's Chancellor, UK's Finance Minister, who's been chairing this G7 meeting of finance ministers, says more than a decade they've been discussing this. The countries, the Europeans in particular, have been pushing this for quite some while. The likes of the UK, France, Germany, all looking at digital services tax on those big tech firms. But I think there's been a shift in political will in the past 6 months or so, particularly with the US administration. The previous administration under President Trump tended to push back against the idea of American firms in particular, the likes of Amazon, Netflix, Google, Microsoft being hit with these sorts of taxes, saying they'd make it anti-competitive for American firms. So there's been that shift from the Biden administration, which has shown more willingness to tax big business. Aside from that, it's the big C. COVID-19 has been the other factor. These G7 economies represent around half of the world's economic output, but they've lost hundreds of billions of dollars in terms of their own budgets because of COVID-19, a huge impact on public finances. And so what the options they have in terms of raising taxation with the public is rather limited, and the appetite among the public means more political risk. So they're looking at corporations instead as a solution.
After 2 days of meeting behind closed doors, the breakthrough the group of rich nations was hoping for.
To ensure that there's a level playing field for all types of companies, and whether it's people operating in tax havens or it's digital companies, we're going to level the playing field and inject that principle of fairness into our global tax system. That's the prize.
The deal proposes a global minimum tax rate of 15% for the world's largest firms. It would only apply to companies with at least a 10% profit margin and would see a fifth of any profit above that reallocated and then subjected to tax in the countries they operate. The G7 singled out digital tech firms such as Facebook, Google and Amazon as a key reason for why the rules needed to change.
The argument is a simple one. As the tech giants operate all around the world, they ought to pay their fair share of tax in those locations. And it's the European countries that have led the push for these changes in recent years. And if this deal is rolled out, places like the UK, France and Germany will get to benefit from more tax income to spend on their own public services.
With all the wealthy nations here seeing their finances battered by COVID-19, those considerations are even more important. But there will be pushback. The tech giants have previously indicated the difficulties with measuring their services that are truly global. Then there are the others who stand to lose out. Nations like Ireland and Hungary, which may seem less attractive to multinational firms as a low tax base. And what about the wider world? The G7 represents almost half of global economic output, but will other countries be on board?
There are a number of countries that have concerns. Ireland and China are examples. This isn't a finished agreement. There are details still to be worked out.
Securing such an agreement won't be easy, especially with most governments still focusing on the pandemic. That was also discussed here, along with a pledge to make sure climate change is at the heart of future budgets.
Well, as we heard there are details to be worked out, lots of details. What's the realistic likelihood of this being rolled out worldwide?
I think it's going to be a real challenge. The G7 representing, as I said, around half of economic output around the world, but it's just 7 nations. The EU was involved in this. The next step is the G20 meeting, the 20 biggest economies in the world, meeting in Venice in Italy in July. They'll take this agreement there and try and get others on board, the likes of China, the likes of Russia, the likes of India. That's going to be difficult in a multipolar, fractured world to try and get that agreement. The companies so far, they've responded, Facebook saying that they welcome this, even if it means it's going to mean more tax, but I think there's a lot of hurdles to be ironed out before this is rolled out around the world. Luigi Barkle, thank you very much. Well, meanwhile, trade ministers from across the Asia-Pacific region have been meeting at this year's APEC gathering hosted by New Zealand. Leaders have agreed to boost trade and cooperate in the fight against coronavirus. CGTN's Owen Poland reports now from Auckland.
The sky tower which dominates the Auckland skyline is in many ways highly symbolic of a giant needle, which Asia-Pacific nations hope will inject vaccines and vitality into regional economies to help them recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. As the host of APEC 2021, New Zealand says it has a responsibility to respond to the greatest health and economic challenge of our lifetime by enabling the safe and efficient distribution of vaccines and essential goods that will keep the global trading system flowing smoothly. New Zealand's Trade Minister Damien O'Connor says that free, fair and open trade has unlocked massive growth across the region, but there have also been worrying signs of vaccine protectionism and restricted supply chains which are affecting the flow of goods and services. The major theme of the APEC Trade Ministers Forum has been to join, work and grow together, and O'Connor has asked his fellow ministers to accelerate access to vaccines and other goods that are essential in fighting the pandemic. Senior officials from APEC's 21 members have agreed that practical ways must be found to support recovery through trade, like eliminating tariffs on vaccines to help speed up production and distribution. In simple terms, the more people that get vaccinated, the safer it will be to reopen borders, which is critical to economic recovery. A recent report also highlighted the fact that APEC region is responsible for most of the world's COVID-19 vaccine production, but inoculation rates across members is uneven because of unequal access to vaccines, and it will make the recovery very fragile because of the higher risk of infections. Improving supply chains is another key issue. COVID-19 caused significant disruption to trade in the Asia-Pacific region, and APEC's Policy Support Unit says that there's a need for greater resilience, which could be achieved by more regional cooperation in harmonising regulations and promoting digitalisation. And while the latest economic data across the APEC region indicates that economies are rebounding much better than expected in 2021, experts warn that there are still significant uncertainties like weak investment, high inflation, job losses and a resurgence of infections that could affect future growth. Owen Poland, CGTN, Auckland.
Russia's President Vladimir Putin has accused the United States of double standards, criticizing its handling of the Washington riots earlier this year. He also blamed the United States for poor relations between the two countries, but said he hopes that'll improve after he meets Joe Biden at a summit in Geneva. Putin was speaking at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, where organizers say more than 800 deals worth over $52 billion have been signed. Alyosha Milenkovic reports.
Parts of what happened at this year's forum were expected, but it also had some surprises. The Russian president personally attended a plenary session. That's Vladimir Putin's first public appearance at an event of such scale since the start of the pandemic. But it was not unexpected.
We don't have disagreements with the United States. They have the only disagreement. They want to withhold our development. They talk about it publicly. Everything else is a derivative from that position, everything, and the limitations in the sphere of the economy, and the attempt to influence domestic issues in our country by bearing on the forces inside of Russia they consider as theirs.
The number of attendees was lower than previous years, which was again expected. But the numbers were still much higher than many thought they would be. What wasn't expected was the virtual participation of Austrian Chancellor Sebastian Kurz and Emir of Qatar Sheikh Tamim Al Thani. The WHO's regional head for Europe, Hans Kluge's low-key appearance was also a bit of a surprise at this year's forum. But all participants said they are happy to be here.
Regardless of the fact that we see less people here, but it's pretty much same partners and new ones. And I'm very happy that we finally, after 2 years of the gap, are meeting tonight, and it makes people, let's say, more optimistic.
Everybody also agreed that the world is heading towards a major change triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic. The rapid emergence of new digital technologies, green energy, and low to zero emission industries are the inevitable and fast approaching shifts in our daily lives. And of course, before all of that, we'll first need to defeat the still ongoing pandemic. The 24th St. Petersburg International Economic Forum has closed. It was the perfect reflection of the challenging times the world is currently facing. It may not be a mark of the end of the pandemic, but it for sure was a promise of better times ahead. Alyosha Milenkovic, CGTN, from Russia's northern capital, St. Petersburg.
Sri Lanka is facing its worst maritime disaster in decades after a Singaporean container ship carrying chemicals and plastics caught fire and sank off its coast. Plastic waste has already polluted surrounding beaches and fishing grounds, and officials continue to be on high alert for a possible oil spill. Roel Raymond reports.
We're here on Kepungura Beach on the western coast of Sri Lanka, where for over a week troops have been engaged in cleaning operations. Plastic pellets, tiny microplastics, have covered the beach, creating a great impact on the marine environment. But that isn't all. The Express Pearl was carrying 378 tons of oil, which could cause an even greater impact on the environment and marine life in this area. Because there has not been an oil spill yet, experts in Sri Lanka venture the guess that given the nature of the blaze, it is possible much of the oil aboard the ship burnt with it. However, this has not yet been proved, and authorities say a national oil spill contingency plan is currently in place.
There are some coral reefs in the deep areas where now the ship is ground, and also there are some two reef patches. They are actually the sandstone reefs going parallel to the beach along the area where the most of the ecological damages are seen. So this is biologically rich environment, and other than that, it's economically also very important because that also support fisheries as well.
Debris from the burning ship has already impacted marine life and the livelihood of fishermen. With the country in the middle of a third wave of the coronavirus, fishermen who are already finding it difficult to make a living are now faced with a double crisis.
A lot of people here engage in net fishing, but the plastic bags have lodged themselves on the rocks and prevented the prawns and fish from coming here. That will have a big impact on us. Also, it will be a big problem if people stop buying fish. We will not be able to sell anything. It will be of no use.
Experts from the University of Western Australia's Oceans Institute, who are tracking the flow of the plastic pellets, have projected they will cross from Sri Lanka into the Bay of Bengal in the coming days. The catastrophe is the worst marine disaster Sri Lanka has ever faced, and the impact on the environment is expected to last decades. Roel Raymond, CGTN, Colombo.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead here on The World Today. 15 Asian elephants walking across China, and the locals doing everything they can to stay out of the way.
More than 100,000 people in Italy have now died from COVID-19.
The vaccination programme offers some hope for the future, but intensive care units are near capacity.
The Spanish government is hoping to vaccinate over 1 million people by next month.
Living in Germany are struggling with their mental health.
Hungary is supplementing the EU's vaccine rollout, buying doses from Russia and China to speed up the process.
4 million people have tested positive in France.
After a grim winter, the promise of a spring bloom that could mean freedom for millions.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. The world's richest countries agree how to tax big companies like Amazon and Google. And Russia's president criticizes the United States for double standards on the Washington rioters ahead of a summit with Joe Biden. Around 100 people have been killed by armed men in northern Burkina Faso. It's the worst attack in the region in recent years. Our correspondent Deji Badmus is in Lagos for us. Deji, what's the latest we know about this attack, and how has the government there responded?
Well, Jamie, this attack happened in a commune known as Seba in the northern Sahel region of that country. Even though the government has given a provisional figure of 100, it says that the death toll could actually rise beyond that number. That's what the president has said. And the president has gone ahead to declare three days now of national mourning. And he says the security forces of the country are in hot pursuit of the terrorists who carried out this attack, and that he would ensure that they are brought to justice. But, of course, as you have said, this is one of the worst attacks in that country, and it happened in a region that is quite notorious for terrorist activities. Now you have Al-Qaeda and, of course, ISWAP, that's the Islamic State for West African province now, operating in that area. We've seen attack in that region before, not the first attack, but this is, of course, the worst we have seen. And from what we have gathered from government sources, it appears the terrorists stormed several communities in that village and just opened fire on people blindly. And after killing them, they took off. So it's a terrible one, and the government says its forces are doing all they can to ensure they get the terrorists and bring them to justice. Jamie?
Deji Badmus in Lagos, thank you very much. 2 deadly coal mine accidents have been reported in China. In Henan province, 2 people have died and 6 people are missing after a coal mine blast. More than 300 miners have been found safe. Search and rescue operations continue for the missing. Meanwhile, in China's Heilongjiang province, 8 people are missing after a coal and gas blast. Rescue work is underway. United Airlines says it plans to start flying supersonic jets across the Atlantic as early as 2029. United said it will buy the aircraft from a company called Boom Supersonic Craft based in Colorado. The planes would cut the journey time across the Atlantic in half, but critics say the engines are just too noisy and bad for the planet. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has made scathing criticism of the Catholic Church following the discovery of the remains of 215 Indigenous children at one former Catholic school. Trudeau called on the Vatican to release its private records.
We expect the church to step up and take responsibility for its role in this and be there to help in the grieving and the healing, including with records that is necessary.
The judge in the United States has overturned California's 30-year ban on assault weapons. The move has been condemned by the state's governor, Gavin Newsom. The judge who made his ruling described California's assault weapons ban as unconstitutional. After 5 years of service in Cambodia, hero rat Magwawa is getting ready to retire. The rodent, who was given a gold medal for bravery last year, has sniffed out 71 landmines and 38 pieces of unexploded ordnance during his distinguished career. His handler says his performance has saved many lives, but he's now slowing down a bit. The African giant pouch rat will retire later this month. It's the 77th anniversary of the D-Day landings, the military operation that began the last phase of the Second World War. A memorial to the event that shaped modern Europe will be unveiled at Sunday's official commemoration. The sculpture and a wall with all the names of all those who died has been built overlooking the coast in Normandy. For a sneak preview, europe.cgtn.com. The Chinese Foreign Minister Wang has met the Indonesian President's envoy in the Chinese city of Guayung. CGTN's Trey Huiyao reports.
Chinese Foreign Minister and State Councilor Wang Yi and Luhut Binsar Panjaitan, Indonesia's coordinator for cooperation with China, had a couple of meetings Saturday night here in Guayung. Now, they signed 2 MOUs. One is on maritime cooperation. This may include areas such as marine scientific research, maritime search and rescue, and disaster prevention. The other regards a mechanism for high-level dialogue and cooperation between the two nations. This is significant because, unlike previous cooperation which took place between ministries, this mechanism essentially brings all ministries and departments from both sides together on a single platform. And this would essentially accelerate the progress of cooperation in all areas. And Wang Yi said that this mechanism marks a new height of China-Indonesia relations. He also said that Indonesia is a representative of emerging economies and a big developing country, and China sees its relations with Indonesia from a strategic point of view. Now, last year, despite the pandemic, two-way trade between China and Indonesia actually boomed. In the first 10 months, bilateral trade reached over $60 billion. In regards to COVID-19, China has helped Indonesia by providing vaccines, and President Joko Widodo was the first in his country to receive a Chinese jab. And on the Belt and Road Initiative, China hopes to expedite projects like the Jakarta-Bandung high-speed railway and industrial parks. And Wang Yi said at the meeting that China is willing to push for bilateral relations in a comprehensive and high-level direction. CGTN, Guayang.
Pakistan is among the countries worst affected by the climate emergency. This year, the country is co-hosting World Environment Day with the United Nations, working to raise global awareness to protect the planet. Daniel Khan reports now from Islamabad.
In the Global Climate Risk Index annual report of 2020, Pakistan was placed on the 5th spot on the list of countries most vulnerable to climate change, as the country endured economic losses worth $3.8 billion due to climate-related disasters. Experts say climate change and melting glaciers of the Himalayas pose a huge risk of extreme weather events like flash floods, droughts, and rainfall in Pakistan. The theme for this year's World Economic Day is ecosystem restoration, with a special focus on creating a good relationship with nature.
Yeah, I think it's great to see Pakistan taking the lead in hosting this year's World Environment Day. Pakistan is also taking the lead on other fronts, on nature conservation, ecosystem restoration, and the work against climate change.
A special cycling event under the theme of Paddle for a Green Future was held in Islamabad.
The basic purpose is to, show the people that we should maximize the use of, such healthy activities and reduce our dependence on the fossil fuels.
This year will mark the launch of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration.
We're talking about the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, and Pakistan, with its focus on nature-based solutions, the 10 billion trees, the Protected Area Initiative, Recharging Pakistan, all of these are nature-based solution projects.
The government of Pakistan took up massive afforestation drive through a 10 billion tree tsunami spread over 5 years. The ambitious project includes restoring mangroves, increasing forest cover, planting trees in urban settings, including schools, colleges, public parks, and green belts.
The project is expected to deliver dividend in preserving atmosphere, reducing greenhouse gas effects, decrease intensity of random floods, lowering rains, droughts, and enhancing other biodiversity supportive actions.
According to the Ministry of Climate Change, 6.3% of forest cover was increased since the project began. Experts believe assigning the responsibility to Pakistan to host the World Environment Day will lead to renewed focus and attention towards the environment in the region. Daniel Khan, CGTN, Islamabad.
A herd of 15 wild Asian elephants has grabbed the headlines around the world for weeks now as they journey across China. CGTN's Mark Kerr reports on their latest two-day stopover.
The herd has so far traveled around about 500 kilometers after leaving their natural habitat in Xishuangbanna last March. And Xishuangbanna sits in the southern part of Yunnan province, and they have been moving in a northeast and north trajectory, and before finally reaching Kunming city. And so far they haven't acted very violently, and experts are saying it's mainly thanks to the mild coping method being taken at the moment. So local authorities are basically doing three things: observation, interception, and redirection. So over 600 emergency response personnel and 14 surveillance drones have been dispatched to keep track of the animals' movement, and over 100 muck trucks and excavators have been driven down to the roadsides and even down to the riverbanks on the route where the elephants were anticipated to pass. And finally, since they are here to find food, humans have gathered over 15 tons of vegetables and fruits to the liking of the animals and put the food in the middle of the road for them to eat so that the elephants won't enter densely populated areas. Forestry authorities are saying they're not considering putting them down just yet, and it's not just because Asian elephants are endangered species and class 1 protected animal in China with a total number of just over 300. It's also because the people of Yunnan have been living in harmony with their giant neighbors for decades, and it's against their will to really let's say kill these animals, except when there are cases, individual cases of danger or harm.
Baby squid, along with other supplies, have arrived at the International Space Station. The squid were taken to their new home aboard a SpaceX rocket. They'll now be used in experiments to try and improve the health of astronauts. And that's it for The World Today. Thank you for watching. We're on smart TV apps such as Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app. Stephen Cole's next with the agenda investigating costing the earth. From me, it's goodbye.